Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this concluding press briefing for the 81st IATA Annual General Meeting and World Air Transport Summit. Thanks for joining us for this concluding briefing. You've all heard lots of comments, lots of speeches over these last couple of days. So we'll have no introductory remarks other than taking some questions. My name is Tony Consul. I'll be moderating the session along with Pieter Elbers, who's the CEO of IndiGo Airlines, our host for this event, and also the chairman of our board of directors for the last year, as well as Willie Walsh, the Director General of IATA. So same drill as yesterday. If you have a question, please raise your hand. When recognized, if you can let us know your name and affiliation, that would be fantastic. The shorter the questions, the more questions we'll have time for. So if I can ask you to be short in the questions and keep them at kind of the industry level, that would be fantastic. Who wants to ask the first question? Take one in the front row.
Thank you. Neela Matthews. What work has been left over from last year, Pieter, that you will take on, and what will be your priority this year? Thank you.
I assume that refers to the work as the chair of the IATA Board of Governors. Thank you. Well, I think it was mentioned yesterday in the AGM that IATA was founded many years ago. The fact that we have the 81st AGM here speaks to that. And what we have undertaken last year is a significant review of some of the governance and internal procedures and processes. I think that was much needed. The board felt it was much needed. And I think in Willie's speech yesterday, he alluded to some of them, and you saw a few of the resolutions which were out there yesterday were exactly geared to that. And I think that work under the leadership now of Luis Gallego will continue to be done. There's still some procedural around conferences and elements which are out there still to be done. I think IATA has done an excellent job in some of the alignment on safety, the financial processes, the advocacy part, but clearly the world has changed, and it's good for IATA to move on with that change, and of course it's Willie and the team who are actually doing that work, and the role of the Board of Governors is to oversee that on the other hand side and try to give some guidance and inputs on the other hand side, and that's what we have been doing. And I would say we've covered 70% and another 30% to be done. And I think the structure of IATA, and that's why it works quite well. I've been the chair of the board for the past year, and Luis Gallego has been the vice chair. So he doesn't kind of start new, he continues on what we collectively have been doing, and we'll take that up basically as from yesterday afternoon when I handed over the baton to him.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll take another question in the front, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Mark Pilling from Arabian Aerospace Aviation Week. Willie, one for you. After 3 days, after the Board of Governors meeting, 3 days of meetings with airlines here, the meetings you've had between you, what is the mood, what's the airline mood, what's the IATA mood on the 2050 net zero emissions target overall? You know, are you still committed to it, especially considering what you've been saying about the availability of SAF, the lack of progress on technology, the lack of will from the oil giants, oil majors to come in and help? What's that sort of thought, please?
Yeah, the industry is still obviously targeting net zero in 2050. I think part of the reason we've been talking about the issue so much over the past couple of days is because we are concerned about the pace of progress, or the lack of coordination in some areas that will be critical to facilitating the industry's transition to net zero. I think it's also been helpful to be in a country like India, where India has said they're targeting net zero in 2070. China had said net zero in 2060, and maybe some of the countries and indeed some individual companies who were pushing to try and achieve net zero earlier than that, not just 2050, but some earlier than 2050, are now recognizing the massive scale of the challenge ahead of us. So everybody in the industry recognizes that we have to play our part in addressing the environmental impact. I think all of the panel discussions both yesterday and today, we're acknowledging that this is not something we can ignore. But I think there is great concern that we're not making sufficient progress, not as airlines, but as the value chain that needs to support the airlines transitioning to net zero in 2050. And that's the reason we're calling it out. We clearly want to see more coordinated action on the part of governments. I think we're not being helped by countries and regions with mandates without accompanying incentives to stimulate production. I think we've been able to demonstrate that mandates have really not done anything to promote the additional production of sustainable aviation fuels, but have merely added additional costs with no environmental benefit, and that's of great concern to all of the CEOs in the airline. I think we're also concerned that a number of the key players who have said nice words about net zero in 2050 aren't matching those words with actions, and we've made clear from the very beginning that the airline industry will not be able to achieve net zero in 2050 unless everybody in the wider value chain supports the industry in doing that. So I think today it's, I've used the word sounding the alarm. I think it is a wake-up call. We still have time to get there, but we do need to see more action on the part of all of the partners in the value chain to make sure that the industry can get there.
Have you talked about delaying it here, Willie?
Sorry?
Have you talked about this?
No, there's been no discussion about changing the date or delaying it, no.
Have you had a chance to meet the
Okay,
Indian?
maybe we can have, raise your hand to be recognized. There was a question in the back first, and then we'll come around.
Sorry, it was a follow-up.
Thank you. Tanguy Guévenard with Agence France Presse based in Paris. Mr. Walsh, could you give us more color about the industry's mood when it comes to travel to the US this summer? We've heard, soothing words from some airlines. On the other hand, the World Travel and Tourism Council has been a bit more bearish. Where's the truth, and do you have any light to shed on the forward bookings, please?
Well, I always believe that the truth is in the data, and therefore we spend a lot of time analysing the data rather than just reading the headline or some of the stories that are out there. What the data tells us to date is that if I look at traffic between Europe and North America, obviously a very important international route, it's still trading ahead of where we were last year. We had seen a shortfall in March. It was 1% down in March, but in April it was 2.4% from memory ahead of where we were in April last year. So first quarter was positive versus last year. Second quarter has started positive versus last year. And if I look at the data we have, which we don't share publicly, but we have a lot of data within IATA on forward booking profiles. Again, that looks for Europe to North America, for me as a former airline CEO, it looks fine. It's slightly soft in the fourth quarter, but the fourth quarter is tiny volumes of bookings, and I think that point was made yesterday. The booking window has narrowed significantly. So trying to predict what's going to happen for the rest of the year based on the data that we have for the fourth quarter is impossible. But I suspect when we do look back on 2025, we'll see that transatlantic traffic, Europe to North America, has been slightly better than 2024 based on the trends that we're seeing at the moment. And I know, talking to a lot of airline CEOs, they've talked about some softening in the bookings, but nobody is showing any great concern at the moment. And I think, as we've seen previously, where there may be some consumer reluctance, that can always be addressed through price stimulation. And that's been what we've seen historically. And I think some airline CEOs have indicated that that's something that they still have available to them if they want to use it, to start looking at some potential price stimulation to increase demand on the transatlantic. But based on the data that we have, first quarter was positive versus last year, second quarter has started positive versus last year, and the outlook based on the data that we have remains, I would say, remains positive for 2025.
Okay, we'll come to you in the front row.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is just a follow-up question on what my colleague here asked to Willie. If in the last 2 days you've had the opportunity to speak with the Indian government on this 2070 target that they have set, any kind of dialogue with them. Second question is for Pieter. Lovely to get your insights if you could share on overall reflections of how the AGM has gone by.
Well, the one thing I would say, and I think you may have heard yesterday when we were addressed by the Minister, he talked about the mandates that India has, both in 2027, I think it's 1% in 2027, and building up over the coming years. So, you know, I think India remains focused on playing its part in helping the world to address the environmental challenges that we have, and that would include the airline industry. I think Pieter's made a point, I'll let him comment, but I think a very valuable point. If you look at the fleet in operation in India, it's very young relative to the rest of the world, and with the new aircraft that have been ordered, you know, you'll see the average age of the aircraft operating in India continue to be probably one of the youngest fleets in the world, and clearly new aircraft, modern aircraft, are much more efficient than the aircraft they're replacing, which is one of the reasons we have continued to emphasise the need for the aircraft manufacturers to address the challenges that they have in terms of delivering new aircraft.
Thank you. Yeah, you asked me a little reflection on the IATA AGM, and perhaps it's a good moment to, you know, the AGM has two components, if I may. One is a rather functional component. I mean, IATA has its annual AGM, and you have to go through that procedure, which we did yesterday morning, and I think that went off very well. And it's a unique opportunity, actually, where the entire aviation community from all over the world is connecting, and for the lack of a better word, speed dates all its meetings around. But that's the functional part of it. I would say the non-functional part of it, for my view, has been a resounding success in terms of what have we achieved. And the objective of inviting the IATA AGM back to India after 42 years was to showcase how India has changed over these years, and what all is happening in India. And if I reflect on what we have been able to showcase, we had a vibrant evening where we could showcase Indian culture, Indian food, Indian dynamics. We have been able to demonstrate that the Indian airlines, not only IndiGo but also Air India and others, are making big steps forward in terms of growth and in terms of global aspirations. And I don't think we could have wished for any better closing yesterday of the day than having the Honourable Prime Minister addressing the audience and expressing all the ambitions of India when it comes to aviation, and underlining the importance of aviation as an integral part of the India growth story. Be it the number of airports, be it leases, be it MRO facilities, be it all the different steps, were all highlighted, I would say, in a very comprehensive but yet very energizing and holistic presentation. So, and that opportunity to showcase to the rest of the world how India is moving forward, and how aviation in India, not only in India itself, but also integrated with the rest of the world, presented again by the Honourable Prime Minister himself, that was an incredible moment of proud and prideness for all of us, but also, I would say, a good way to close yesterday's meeting at the AGM itself. So all in all, we're extremely satisfied, and we could not have wished for a better AGM from that side for India, and we brought it back after 42 years, and I think we've done it in the appropriate way.
Yeah, I think you can be very proud, Pieter. I think your team at IndiGo has done an absolutely outstanding job. I said it in my closing remarks to the panel, an outstanding job in making everybody feel welcome, and in doing it with a big smile on their face and energy that probably we don't witness in most parts of the world. So I think fantastic achievement.
Thank you, Willie.
Next question. maybe we'll take one here.
Good afternoon, Chris Chamberlain from Point Hacks in Australia. In recent times we've seen China ease its visa requirements to make it easier for people to travel. How much impact do rigid visa requirements continue to have on your members, and what actions would you like to see governments take, in particular India, which is still quite tight despite its e-visa process? What actions would you like to see governments take to spur that travel demand and help fill those aircraft that you've ordered and that every other airline has on order and is hoping to fill?
When you speak about visa process, if you allow me to elaborate on that way, it was also mentioned yesterday in the presentation. I think for domestic travel, a fantastic IATA system has been developed, and that has been done domestically. And clearly, in terms of number of travelers, that was step one to be done. With that system in place and now covering very significant parts of the country, the government of India has started the next phase in that and also make that accessible for international travelers. So if you arrive here in Delhi Terminal 3, you see the first steps being taken on that part. That's in place already in some other parts of the world, but I think we now with the government of India taking those steps and those initiatives, that's clearly a step forward in terms of promoting more international travelers and visitors from overseas into India itself. So I would say the domestic foundation is in place. The intention and the first steps are being made on the international front, and clearly this conference will help to further stimulate and emphasize that. And I mentioned it yesterday, India is blessed with 42 World UNESCO sites, so the opportunity to build on that from a tourism perspective is just enormous.
Okay. Maybe we'll take a question from Tim.
Thank you, Tim Pieter from Reuters. I wonder if you could just come back a little bit more to this stalemate over the supply of SAF. Essentially you're saying you would buy SAF if it was there, but it's not available. But the chart that you showed shows that SAF prices have been going down, which is not what you would typically expect. Well, from September 23 to May 25, according to the, if I'm not mistaken, it seems to have gone down quite a lot. That's not a typical chart, even in an imperfect market, that you would expect when there's a very strongly motivated, frustrated buyer. So is there not some way in which you could step up and make a stronger demand signal to help get this show on the road?
So I think the first thing to point out, when you see a chart with SAF price, it's a manufactured price. In other words, nobody knows what the price of SAF is other than the individual carriers that buy it. What that chart shows actually is a price that is estimated based on the production cost of SAF, which should suggest that the price, if they were selling it based on a production price lowering, that the price of SAF should be lower. But there is no open market for SAF, so there is no price. So when we show data, it's, as I said, it's a price that's manufactured, building up from production costs, which is the message we've been saying. If we see volumes increase, you would expect the price to reduce as the overhead associated with that gets spread over more significant volumes. So it's an imperfect market at the moment. So your point is valid, but I would just add a little bit of caution to the chart, which, as I said, is constructed from what we estimate the production costs of SAF to be, and they have come down for various reasons over the period that you've talked about. I think the demand signal remains very strong. You know, it's particularly true for a lot of airlines who have committed to 10% SAF by 2030. You know, I don't know if you heard, like Patrick Healy from Cathay was reinforcing that message. They have a 10% target for 2030. A lot of airlines too. So it's not just about trying to hit that 5% figure that governments have set as a target for 2030. But what we're seeing is that there's SAF production in some parts of the world, and there are many parts of the world where it's just not being produced at all. So if you listen to Roberto Alvo, who will be hosting us in Rio next year, and I think it's going to be fascinating to have that discussion in Rio. You know, Roberto has said that he is committed to SAF, and I think he had set a 5% target by 2030. But he said, I'm only going to do it if it's available. And he says, unfortunately, there isn't a single drop of SAF being produced in Latin America, where you would expect it to be produced, given the history they have in terms of producing biofuels. And I think that's part of the message that we need to get across, and maybe it's a criticism that we should take upon ourselves, that by emphasizing this term, sustainable aviation fuel, I think some people have taken away from that this is something special for the aviation industry and we're looking for special treatment. It was pointed out in a couple of the presentations that what we're talking about is a sustainable fuel that will be used for aviation, but will also be used in other forms of transport and other industries. And this is not just about helping the transition for the airline industry, it's actually part of the overall transition to net zero. And I think that is something that maybe we need to emphasize further as we go into the next couple of years of this debate. But I would argue that airlines have sent very strong signals. It's frustrating for many airline CEOs who have these self-designed targets that they're struggling to see where they can get it, and they're going right around the world. And Pieter made this point yesterday, they're going right around the world to buy SAF so as they can meet the targets that they've set themselves. Now fortunately most of those airlines have global networks where they can use it in the point where it's being produced, but as Pieter said yesterday, it would be absolutely crazy to meet your target by buying sustainable fuel on the other side of the world and then having to ship it to use it here. Like that doesn't achieve anything. So it's a complex situation, but you know, the simple message from the airline industry is the industry is committed, the industry wants to play its part, the industry wants to see governments coordinate their policies so that there is an incentive and a stable network for more SAF production that the industry can use going forward.
Okay, maybe we'll take a question here in the third row.
Good afternoon, I'm Coffee Firm from the Straits Times in Singapore. Just had a question because at this AGM we haven't heard much about Southeast Asia. So I'm wondering if Mr. Walsh and Mr. Elbers could give some colours to the growth trajectory in the region, and especially Singapore's role as a hub there, and any challenges you foresee going forward for the region. So, thank you.
I'm not precisely understanding your question, sorry.
A growth trajectory in Southeast Asia and Singapore specifically. Any colour about what the growth will look like in the coming years? And
yeah, you know, the recovery from COVID clearly was slower in Southeast Asia. I'm pleased to say it's now not just exceeded the position we were in 2019, but actually showing very strong rates of growth. The area would be expected to show some of the fastest growth in the industry going forward. So I think it's been a difficult few years for the region. The recovery in 2024 was very strong. Performance in the first 4 or 5 months of this year has been very positive, with strong growth being witnessed right across the region. And I think the longer term outlook for the region remains very positive as well. So you know, when I look at the world of aviation, I look at this part of the world for incredible growth. You know, India, China, the rest of Asia has been an area where we've seen tremendous growth, great investment, great opportunity, and I think the future here is extremely exciting. You look at places like Latin America, the industry going through restructuring, but still evidence of strong demand for travel and a great opportunity once the issues of restructuring are behind them. I think that's very close. You may have heard Adrian Newhouse talk about that yesterday. But then we look at markets like Europe and North America, more mature markets, more stable in terms of the growth outlook. Europe would be expected to grow faster than North America. North America is probably going to be the slowest growth area, but that's mainly a reflection of the very mature market and the very large domestic market. And then we always point to Africa, where there's got to be massive opportunity in the future, but unfortunately a lot of challenges that will need to be overcome if Africa is to truly experience the potential that aviation will make for the economies there. But Southeast Asia, Asia in general, very positive outlook for the future.
If I can build on that, I guess India is also functioning to some extent as a growth engine for that, because we see a lot of new traffic developing between India and Southeast Asia, to Thailand, to Malaysia, to Singapore, so that the growth in India is not only the domestic growth, that's also the regional growth. And I would guess traditionally we would look between India and the Middle East. Increasingly we see a lot of traffic, and we've added a lot of new flights between India and Southeast Asia, and in fact we see an enormous response in the market for that. From both sides, by the way, not only point of sale India, but also point of sale Southeast Asia. So just to build on what Willie said, it's not only Southeast Asia in itself, I would say it's also the connectivity which is generating new traffic and new opportunities.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, question up there.
Thank you. Bruno Trevidic, Les Echos, Paris. About Russia, there's still a big competitive disadvantage for European airlines when they want to fly to China. There are also many other aspects, safety issues and things like that. Have you seen any progress on any of those topics? How you hope that you might see some in the age of the actual negotiation?
So I think it's been very clear from the beginning of the war in Ukraine, from the Russian invasion, that the airspace will only reopen to everybody when peace is agreed in that region. And obviously that's something that I believe everybody would like to see, and would like to see as soon as possible. So while the war continues, I don't believe there's any possibility of seeing the full reopening of airspace over Russia, which will continue therefore to have an impact on flights between Europe and Asia. And I think most airlines have taken that into account and have taken network planning decisions that are not dependent on the airspace reopening. So I think airlines will wait to see for evidence of peace in the region before they start looking at reshaping the network and recovering capacity back into that part of the network, Europe into Asia, Asia into Europe. So I think there's still some time to go before we see a return to normality there.
Okay. Question here. Fourth row. And then we'll move down.
Lewis Harper from Airline Business. We're obviously gathered in India with a backdrop of huge growth potential, government support. Next year we're heading to Brazil, where the fair to say some airlines have struggled recently. I just wondered, Willie, if you could comment on what the backdrop is there and the challenges and opportunities in that market.
Yeah, like Brazil is a very big domestic market, probably number 4 in the world. So obviously the biggest would be the US domestic market, and the Chinese domestic market, and the Indian domestic market, and Brazil is probably number 4 after India. If I look back, the Indian domestic market, based on the way we assess growth, revenue passenger kilometres, has been growing at about 11.2% compound since 2000. Fantastic, the rate of growth there. During the same period, the Brazilian domestic market has grown at 7.6% compound. So it is an important domestic market, and I think it's a growth market for the future. Brazil has tended to face challenges because we're a dollar-denominated industry, and you've seen quite significant volatility in currency in Brazil. which has been a major headwind for the carriers there. So, you know, they do a fantastic job operating in the most efficient way possible, and then they see their currencies in the region devalue against the dollar, and there's just nothing they can do about that. So I think, you know, when I look at Latin America and Brazil in particular, I think the future is actually very positive, and I think they've taken all the right steps, particularly post-COVID, to get their industry in better shape for the future, and I think they've largely achieved that. You know, I think when we're in Brazil next year, we'll be reflecting on a much more positive outlook for Brazil and for the general Latin America region.
Okay, maybe we'll take a question in the second row.
Hi, I'm Lalita from the New Indian Express. I would like to ask Mr. Willie, this SAP deadline and the Indian government, could you elaborate on that further? And also, Mr. Pieter, being the largest airline in India, what steps is IndiGo taking on the SAP front?
So, again, in relation to SAF, I think we've highlighted that, you know, there's great opportunity in India for the production of SAF in the future. And again, I would stress it's not just for the airline industry; it's for any industry that will continue to use a liquid fuel source. And we see that that's going to be the case, you know, beyond 2050. So, you know, there are opportunities here. I think the thing that excites me about India is the coordinated approach to economic growth and development, where the government is looking at all aspects of the economy to see where they can take advantage of changing technology, changing behaviours, to secure the future for India. And I think the country has done a wonderful job. I've been coming to India for probably 25 years now. You know, I witnessed the change firsthand. I think we're all experiencing, many actually for the first time, what India is like and what the culture and the attitude here is. So I've no doubt that the Indian government, again looking to this issue of energy independence, will see the production of sustainable fuels as an opportunity for the future, and I would expect them to fully exploit the opportunities that exist here.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than the earlier things which I said already on that. But perhaps it's also good to make a bit of a differentiation between short-term and long-term. And as I said in the remarks yesterday, it doesn't make any sense for us to start shipping in SAF from outside the country to India and then to say, we're great, we're having a bit of SAF. That doesn't make any sense, right? But the long term, clearly, and that was also mentioned in the speech, for example, yesterday by the Honourable Minister of Transportation, Civil Aviation, actually was also saying, you know, the plans are being made, progress is being made going forward, and so make a bit of a difference between short term and long term in that respect.
Okay, we will do a question in the front row, third in. Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Abhijit here with Reuters. Question for Willie. Willie, we heard the Prime Minister and the Civil Aviation Minister here yesterday talking about how they want to make India a global aviation hub. So I wanted to ask you, if there's anything the Indian government can do to make life easier for its airlines, and if IATA has spoken to the government about it, and what was their response?
Yeah, I think again the ambition is really impressive. Pieter made the point yesterday when we were talking about recruiting the right people and the skills, and that's something that India has an excess of at the moment compared to other parts of the world where maybe they're struggling. So when you look at the emphasis that the Minister placed on the maintenance, repair and overhaul, this is clearly a great opportunity for India. We don't have enough facilities today. One of the reasons why the value chain, supply chain problems have impacted so much on the industry from an engine point of view is there's such a long waiting list for airlines to get their engine into what we call the engine shop. I always think it's funny that we refer to it as a shop, but to get it into the shop for repair. And turn times for engines, which are very expensive assets, have increased significantly from what would typically have been about 90 days, 3 months to more than 9 months now. So you have this asset sitting on the ground because there aren't enough facilities available in other parts of the world. I think that's a huge opportunity for India. I think the airframe maintenance is a huge opportunity for India because you require labour and you require skills, and that's something that I know India is investing in. So I think the ambition to turn India into a major aviation hub, not just airline, but an aviation hub, I think is well founded, and I think all of the opportunities that exist are going to be exciting, and it's great. And we have had this discussion with the Minister for Civil Aviation. He is very excited about it and very committed to it. And again, I think, as Pieter said, the fact that we had the Honourable Prime Minister attend yesterday, I think gives further evidence of the support that exists to deliver on that strategy.
Okay, take a question in the second row.
Manju from the Times of India. This is about Corsair. The global airline industry's carbon dioxide emissions stood at around 900 million in 2024 as compared to 350 million 2019 baseline. So from 2027 the mandatory phase begins. Do you think airlines will have enough options to offset the extra emissions by then?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the short answer is at this stage no. Again, Patrick Healy, the chairman of Cathay, made reference to it this morning. To date, we only have one country, Guyana, who are making the offsets available to the airline industry. One of the things we realised in IATA when we went around the world talking to governments about this is that many of them did not understand their obligation under the ICAO Corsia agreement to make these eligible units available to us. We are seeing more and more countries now acknowledge that there is a need to play their part, but also to acknowledge that they see an opportunity. We're facilitating the sale or the auctioning of these credits through a platform we have in IATA. We're doing that on a regular quarterly basis. So there are some credits available, but obviously the volume that's required is going to ramp up significantly, and we need to see more supply. So we've been highlighting the concern around this from a very early stage. We've highlighted the concern to ICAO. There's an event going on in Montreal at the moment, which unfortunately I couldn't attend because I'm here, but I recorded a video to be played at it where I'm highlighting the need for ICAO and governments to recognise their obligations under Corsia. So our obligation is to buy and redeem, their obligation is to make them available. And we can't fulfil our obligation unless governments in the first place fulfil theirs. So if Corsia doesn't work the way I believe it should, it won't be because of a lack of action on the part of the airlines, it will be because of a lack of action on the part of governments who haven't made credits available.
Okay. Here, we'll take a question in the front row.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. I'm Steve Goldstein. I'm a reporter with Cerium. I want to change the subject to sustainable aviation fuel. So I think one thing we're missing, or we're not missing, just not mentioning, is that sustainable aviation fuel is still internal combustion. There's really minimal carbon emissions reductions. It's on the feedstock side, and that is debated by environmental groups and by scientists. There's a lot of debate about the actual savings. So, hydrogen, fuel cell electric. What I'd like to know is, are airlines talking to startup developers who aren't Airbus, who aren't Boeing, talking to startup developers? Are they hearing any, are they are they having meetings with companies we haven't heard of who might revolutionize flight the way, for instance?
So there are discussions, and I know of several companies who have had discussions with airlines, and many airlines who have been reaching out to identify whether there are other players. I think what we've got to do is be realistic. In the time frame to 2050, we do not see a technological change that will play a significant part in helping the abatement to net zero in 2050. Beyond 2050, probably beyond 2040, yes, I think there is possibilities. Hydrogen will play a part at some stage in the future. The reason we've emphasised sustainable aviation fuel is because it's a drop-in fuel and can be used with the existing infrastructure and used with the existing fleet that is in service. Hydrogen will require a separate and quite significant investment in infrastructure to be able to use it at airports around the world. It also requires, major change in the technology on the aircraft. But we do believe that hydrogen will play a part. The critical issue, of course, is the hydrogen needs to be green hydrogen. Volumes of green hydrogen available today are tiny. So there's a number of changes that would need to take place. Hence the reason we've emphasised the need for sustainable fuel, certainly in the period up to 2050 and beyond. We think sustainable fuel is going to play the biggest part. But clearly, at some stage, new technology, which may come and probably will come from outside of the existing OEMs, will play a part. But it's not going to be significant in the time frame, and that's why we haven't been emphasising it.
Thank you. Okay. I think we have time for one last question. We've discussed SAF a lot, so if there are any issues other than that people would like to talk about, perhaps we'll give the last question to that.
I have an issue which is not SAF.
Great.
Good morning, this is Anita Saxena, Editor, Aviation and Defence Fuels. Yesterday in one of the presentations, there was a very major point which said that a major challenge is severe delays in aircraft deliveries. Now, did this AGM create a platform between the leasing market and the airlines and motivate them to take leasing as an option if the OEMs were delaying the deliveries?
As much as I would like to underline the importance of the AGM, and as much as I would like to underline the importance of IATA, I would think that the production race will not jump up tomorrow because we had such a wonderful gathering here. But has it been an opportunity to sit with each other, to discuss it with each other, to share some insights, get some different viewpoints? Absolutely yes. I think the complexity of many of these discussions is just larger, and without bringing it back to SAFs, even that discussion has a lot of different dimensions with it. So if you look to the challenges in the supply chain and production levels, if it were to be solved simple, it would have been done yesterday, right? Every OEM would like to deliver its products, every OEM would like to, we only pay when we get the product. So from an OEM perspective, you would like to get the flow going. So the complexities behind that discussion are just much more than, people just don't want to deliver the product. So with that, I think the AGM itself is a great opportunity to discuss it. It's a great opportunity to meet people, but it doesn't necessarily, not at all actually, change the world tomorrow. But the in-depth discussions which are taking place, some of the remarks which Willie made yesterday at the AGM itself, I think these are important moments to express it, to make it clear, and to underline the importance of these discussions. So it's a bit of a, I would say, two-sided answer to it. One put some importance to what we have been doing here, and the other side addressing also the complexity of some of the realities we have to deal with.
Did you have representations from the leasing companies?
Sorry?
Did you have representations from the leasing companies here?
Yes. All of the major leasing companies were present. All of them had, because I've seen it from the start of the morning to the end of the day, meetings scheduled with airlines and CEOs and their leasing team. So it's one of the reasons why the lessors like the IATA AGM so much, is that they get an opportunity to meet so many airlines in in a short period of time, and it's one of the reasons why the airlines like it, because it means they have the access to all of the lessors. But it's a big part of the behind-the-scenes activity that goes on at the IATA AGM, and it's been very, very effective.
I'm not sure if the word mela is a good expression, but at least we're all together here, we sit, we talk, we meet everyone, it's very effective.
Okay, with that, I think that'll be the last question. I don't know, Pieter, did you have any concluding remarks you want to make?
Well, thank you, Tony. Well, maybe just to share with everyone, especially for those coming from abroad, thank you so much for coming from all over the world to Delhi, India, and actually we're very happy that you could witness and experience what's going on in India itself, and I hope you return back to the different parts of the world with a sense of what's the potential, what's the size, what's the progress, and what's the ambition of India going forward. So I think this AGM has hopefully created that. And next to, I would say, that part of it, the charm of aviation, and I think that is where aviation will continue to be an industry where people like to work, is that we are connecting people and culture. So I hope many of you will have the opportunity also to get a glimpse of what India has to offer in terms of culture and all the different dimensions, and at least we try to create that reflection in the welcome reception the very first night by all the beauty of India when it comes to food and culture and dance and all the different parts of it. Clearly, with the potential and the growth we see, this is India's time, and therefore thank you IATA for trusting us when we invited IATA to come to India and basically witness. One point is you invite, the other point is it should be accepted. So thank you for IATA and the Board of Governors for accepting that invitation to come here, and I think it should also put on record the appreciation for the Indian government in terms of helping us, ensuring us, and I think I already referred to the presentations both of the Honourable Prime Minister and the Minister who were there. I think that underlines the importance of aviation and indeed the ambitions and lining out these opportunities in MRO and all the other stuff. It's been extremely important. And maybe the last words, even though there are not many in the room here, but there are hundreds and hundreds of IndiGo colleagues who have been helpful, be it welcoming you at the reception, working behind the screen there. I think they have done a wonderful job and are a proud representation of IndiGo as an airline and India as a nation. And for those who are here, I wish you a safe journey back to your countries, and please keep thinking on India and reflecting on what's going on here in India itself. And to the Indian media in the room, I'm sure I'll keep seeing you even sooner than the Western media. Thank you so much.